Greetings cards are such a great product to start with if you're an illustrator who wants to start selling your illustrated own products, because there are so many occasions and reasons for people to buy them, and they're pretty easy to actually make yourself or to send to a printer. My name is Malin, and I've been working as an illustrator and designer for the past 10 years. And in that time, I have worked with lots of clients for their projects and packaging design, but in the last year and a half, I started making my own greetings cards. I both make them in my own studio and I use a local printer. The process is actually really simple, but I know that there are so many questions and little quirks that you need to work out, especially if you're not used to working with a printer or creating your own physical products. So today I thought I would take you through exactly how I come up with good ideas for my greetings cards, how I design them in Procreate, and also how I either print them at home or how I set up the files to send them to the printer. I hope that this video will give you tons of inspiration to create your own, so let's get started. The first step to creating a greetings card collection, or even your very first card, is to come up with the idea behind it. If you like, you can just create beautiful cards that have a lovely illustration on them. Lots of people do this and it can work really well if you have a really unique style. But if you want to be a little bit more strategic about it, one way is to think about the different occasions that are really popular when people are going to be buying a card anyway. My bestsellers have always been the Christmas cards, but there are also occasions like Mother's Day, Father's Day, or a new baby, for example, or graduation. So have a think about what kind of different occasions that your style could work with, and think about how you can apply that to create a unique idea that would be a little bit fun and interesting for people to pick at. Don't worry about creating every single product at once. Start with one and see how you go. Today, I wanted to talk about how I created this Christmas card because I think it can be a good idea to try to understand how you can translate your brand and your style into your own design. My audience and the style that I create in is all about creating really cozy, kind of whimsical and slightly eclectic designs for people who love reading, baking, staying home and being cozy. So when I decided to create this Christmas card design, I knew I wanted to feature a book and some kind of whimsical elements somehow. Sometimes it can be a good idea to start with the saying if you want to put some kind of text on it. So it could be anything from happy birthday to something a little bit more clever. In this case, I wanted to have something that was about New Year's because most of my Christmas cards are more related like around Merry Christmas. And so I wanted something that was talking about the future. And I thought about seeing forward to the next chapter. So I wanted to say something like good luck in your next chapter. And that works really well with my book idea. I then started thinking about the layout of the design. You want to make sure that your text feels really central and easy to read, and you also want to make sure that the elements feel really balanced across your design. In this case, I wanted the book to be the main element, so I made sure to put that in the center, and then I thought about the different items that could complement it. Because it's laying flat on a surface, I didn't want it to just be a one-colored background, so I decided to put some different wrapping papers as if you just unwrapped it, as a way to create a little bit more visual interest. Then to build out that story of really cozy wintertime opening this present together, I decided to put in little items like ribbons and a scissor that is really beautiful design, for example, to add a little extra bit of personality. Once you have your sketch, it's really important to start thinking about your colors. One strategy I always use for any kind of artwork that I create is color blocking. So instead of jumping straight into coloring my artwork and then realizing down the road that it's kind of all colors that are muted on one side and brighter on one side, for example, or it not feeling quite balanced, I start by creating a layer underneath, and I'm just blocking out the colors very roughly. This is what I love about working in Procreate, because you can create so many different layers and you can really have control over the way that you design. I use the dry brush that already comes with Procreate because it creates a little bit more texture, but it's still a really nice filling brush. Procreate, just like Photoshop, creates art based on pixels. So that means that you need to make sure that your artboard is set up to actually be a little bit bigger than the actual artwork you're going to be printing. So I'm making A6 cards, and I tend to illustrate my greeting cards in an A5 size. This is because as you resize and especially try to go bigger, your design will get really pixelated because it's based on pixels. So making it a little bit bigger from the beginning means that we can really ensure that quality. As you work in Procreate and experiment with the colors, you can save the ones that you like to a color palette. You can also use the eyedropper tool as a way to sample colors from different areas. So let's say you want to gather some inspiration from a different picture, you can actually just just put your finger over it and hold it down, and that will sample the color for you. Once we have our colors blocked out, I start by creating a base layer with the basic shapes. I try to make sure that I keep each element on its own layer, but sometimes you don't have enough layers. So with Procreate, it really depends on the type of iPad model that you have and how much storage space you have for how many layers you're actually having available to you. But try to make sure that things that are touching are not actually on the same layer. And that's because in Procreate, you can recolor by just dragging the sample color up from the top to your actual element that you've designed, and that way it will update the color. But if two colors are touching, it will try to recolor both at the same time. As you're illustrating and designing, try to take a step away and imagine what this card would look like at the scale that is going to be printed. And maybe take a step even further back to see what it would look like on a shelf as you're a little bit further away. Is the text legible enough? Are the details blending together, or is everything really clear? Once you have your design ready, you can export it and send it to your computer. Now, as a print designer for my main job, I have been trained to always use CMYK for your color profile rather than RGB, because that's printing colors, and to also use a JPEG or a PDF file rather than a PNG, because these files are print ready. The thing is, my home printer, it prints much better when I print with PNG and I use RGB. Now, this is kind of up to experimentation depending on what kind of printer you have and the settings that you use, but it might be worth experimenting a little bit. But you can choose this file format up here when you're choosing to export from Procreate. Once you have the file on your computer, we need to set it up so that we have the front of the card and the back of the card all in one document. I'll start with the home printing version first. So I work in Adobe programs, so Adobe Illustrator, for example, or Adobe InDesign. The important thing here is, regardless of the program you're using, the important thing here is to make sure that you know exactly where that center fold is. That means that you're going to be placing your design on the right-hand side, and then you're going to have the back of the card on the left-hand side. On the back of the card, you can choose to put your social media handles, your website, a little note about the products or the materials that you used, for example, or even a little brand story if you like. You can keep it plain white, or you can choose to print it the same color as the front or a lighter version, for example. You can, of course, choose to make the inside of the card a design as well. Then make sure to create it on a second artboard so that you can choose double-sided printing later on. When I have my design ready, all I do is make sure that all of the images are embedded so that if I choose to, let's say, delete it from my downloads later on, it's not going to be blurry when I go back to print it in a few weeks. And then we want to make sure that we're saving it as a PDF file, because PDF is best for printing. The paper that you choose to use for your printing is really important for the quality of the print. I have experimented with a couple different ones, and of course I always suggest using as eco-friendly papers as possible. I'll show you the difference between the different printing qualities on different paper, just so you can see what I mean. So this is a fully matte paper that is just a normal, thicker printing paper. And this was one that I started with. Now the problem is the colors here are quite dull, and I'm not really getting any kind of texture to the surface except for this really matte paper. Then I decided to go with this paper. It's called Koala, the brand, and it's double-sided matte photo paper. And the difference is massive. The colors are coming out way more vibrant, and it's also a lot crisper because this paper has a slight finish to it. It means that it's not bleeding out in the edges. One thing to keep in mind when you're ordering paper for your printer is if you have an inkjet or a laser printer. The printer I'm using is an EcoTank 3850, and that's an inkjet printer. The reason I chose this printer is because it has refillable ink cartridges rather than using those ones that you have to put in, and then as soon as one of them runs out, you basically have to exchange all of them. This type of printer is a little bit more pricey up front, but you save so much money on the inks. I'm super happy with how it's been working so far. I've been having it for a bit over a year, and so I definitely recommend it if you're looking for one. To get the best quality from your printer, you might also want to install the printer-specific software. And this is really depending on the kind of printer that you have, but for me, you can actually install their desktop program, and then you can go in and adjust the color, the saturation, and the printing quality manually. This is a small tweak, but it also makes a really big difference, especially if you tend to illustrate in specific color hues. So I often have a lot of yellows or pinks in my design. and it always printed blue really well and green, but it was a little bit muted on the pink and yellow. So I always go in and bump up those colors and bump up the brightness or the saturation a little bit as well. This really is a little bit of an experimentation process, but it really is worth it because once you have it nailed down, your prints are going to look absolutely beautiful. I design A6 cards, so I always print 2 of them to an A4 sheet. So the next step is then to cut them. You can use a normal X-Acto knife and a ruler here, or you can have a cheap option like this one to just use as a paper cutter. Once your card is cut, we need to fold it. And the thing is, of course, you could just fold it, but what tends to happen is it creates little creases and breaks in the paper. So it's really a good idea to have a little bit of a folding setup. You can buy these scoring boards for very cheap, and they really do make an absolute beautiful fold with your cards. So if it's something you're looking into doing a little bit more seriously, I highly suggest it. You just place your card on the scoring board and make sure that one of the lines, the little scoring holes, is lined up with the center of your card. And then you just score it from the front, and then you fold it. If you decide to go with a printing company instead, then we need to make sure that everything is expanded and embedded because they might not have the same typefaces as you on their computer, and they definitely don't have the design files before you send it to them. So what we need to do is make sure that everything is linked or embedded depending on the program that you're using, and then we're going to export it as a PDF as well. Most printers are looking for a file with bleed, so bleed is essentially a little safety zone around the card that if the printer doesn't cut it exactly, you're not going to get a white edge. So here's an example of what that looks like for one of my cards. So I've made sure to extend the design a little bit out to the edges. One thing that's also really important for keeping in mind when you're sending something to a printer, especially if it's a local one that I highly recommend doing because you can have that back and forth conversation, is ask them to check the file, and it's totally okay to ask lots and lots of questions. Like I mentioned, I've been working in print for the last 10 years, and things are always a little bit different depending on which printing company you choose to go with. So asking questions does not make it seem like you don't know what you're doing. It actually shows that you are really serious about getting a good result. A lot of printing companies also offer a test print. So that means that basically they can do a test run to make sure that the colors look good, that the cut is right. You can go and pick it up and look at it together. If you have that option, I highly recommend it. If you live somewhere where there aren't any local printing companies, there are tons of companies online that you can use. A couple examples are moo.com, you can use printed.com, Instant Print, Vistaprint. There's tons of different options. I hope that this video gave you lots of ideas and that making greeting cards doesn't feel so intimidating anymore. If you have any questions at all, please just let me know in the comments. I love to answer your questions. So anything at all, just let me know and I'll help you out. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see a bit more behind the scenes of me creating products and illustrating and just having a cozy time, then you can go check out my studio vlogs as well. Good luck with your greeting cards design. See you next time.